Chosen one, you didn't find this video by accident. Every step of your journey has been preparing you for this exact moment. And now the veil begins to lift. You have been called here not for entertainment but for remembrance. This is not coincidence. It is divine alignment collapsing into your awareness. You were pulled here because something hidden about your life, about your name, is about to be revealed. For too long they tried to keep you from knowing the truth of who you really are. They wanted you mislabeled, distracted, and weakened by an identity that was never yours. But heaven is speaking now, and what was hidden is about to be restored. What if I told you the name they gave you was never the name heaven wrote? What if I told you that everything you've been feeling, that strange restlessness, the sense that you were meant for something greater, was proof that your true name has been calling to you all along? If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Stay with me until the end, because the truth we uncover today will not only change how you see yourself, it will change how generations after you walk in light. Number 1. The borrowed identity. From the moment you were born, they spoke a name over you. That name carried the weight of family expectations, unhealed wounds, and cultural patterns that were never meant to define you. They used it to confine you, to remind you of where they believed you belonged, and to keep you chained to cycles that served their comfort, not your destiny. Many chosen ones live under this false covering for years, believing it is who they are, when in truth it is nothing but a borrowed mask. Scripture warns us of this deception. In Jeremiah 1 verse 5, God says, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you. Before you were born I set you apart." They wanted you to forget that divine setting apart. They wanted you lost in the noise of labels that never fit your spirit. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you've ever felt the weight of a name or role that never matched your soul. The shadows they built around you are about to be pierced, but first, you must hear the whispers rising from within. A question may have echoed inside you for years, though you rarely spoke it aloud. Who am I beyond the name they gave me? Perhaps it came first in dreams where you walked through rooms filled with mirrors, yet none of the reflections felt like yours. Or in moments of silence, when a whisper rose in your spirit saying that the life written for you was not the life you were living. You sensed an invisible veil between what you carried on the outside and what stirred deep within. The world called you by a name, but something in you resisted, like a garment that never fit your soul. That resistance was not rebellion but recognition, a holy signal that there was more to you than they allowed. Even now, as you hear these words, the veil trembles, and your spirit knows this message is not teaching you something new but reminding you of what you already knew. You have always felt different, not because of arrogance but because the world pressed you into shapes you could never hold. In classrooms where others blended in easily, you sat quietly, wondering why their laughter sounded hollow. In family gatherings, you felt the unspoken expectations, the subtle comparisons, the heavy silence when you chose a path they did not understand. Perhaps you were called sensitive or too serious, or accused of carrying weight you could not explain. Yet every time you tried to conform, the unease returned, pressing against your chest like an unanswered question. The loneliness of that misunderstanding became a silent companion, but it also refined your vision. Those years of isolation became the very soil where your awakening took root. The truth is that none of it was random, though they wanted you to believe it was. The strange detours, the disappointments, even the betrayals were pieces of an architecture built in the unseen. Psalm 139 reminds us that all our days were written before one of them came to be. Yet the enemy sought to overwrite that script with false labels and broken roles. They tried to convince you that the failures were your fault, that your difference was a flaw, that your silence meant weakness. But what if each scar was not evidence of your defeat but a cipher, an encrypted marker pointing you back to your original design? The things they dismissed in you were precisely the markers of your calling. You were not wandering. You were being guided by a hand they could not see. Signs have been whispering to you all along, though most would have dismissed them as coincidence. That dream you had years ago, where a stranger called your name in a way that felt more alive than any sound you'd heard. That sudden chill on your skin when you walked into certain places, as though the atmosphere itself knew you did not belong there. The way numbers or words appeared again and again, almost mocking in their repetition, until you realized they were not accidents but alignments. Even your body carried the signs. A racing heart at the moment someone lied to your face. A tightening chest when you stepped into spaces that were not meant for you. These were not symptoms of weakness but signals of your sensitivity, proof that your soul was never asleep. Heaven has always been speaking. You are only now beginning to recognize the language. You have questioned yourself many times, asking whether your instincts were wrong, whether you were simply imagining patterns. But now you see that your intuition was not madness. It was mercy. The warnings that surged in your spirit were not paranoia but protection. They did not want you to trust that inner voice, because if you did, you would become unshakable. Yet the longer you ignored it, the stronger it grew, refusing to let you settle into borrowed identities. What once felt like conflict inside you is becoming confirmation, a quiet agreement between your soul and the eternal. You are learning that peace does not come from fitting in, but from aligning with the truth that was always there. Awareness is not about becoming someone else. It is about recovering what they tried to bury. Beneath the layers of names, expectations, and false stories lies a memory older than this life. It is not a memory of events but of essence, the remembrance that before you were their child, their sibling, their label, you were already known by heaven. Isaiah 62 speaks of a new name bestowed by the mouth of the Lord, not by the lips of men. That is the name pressing against your heart, asking to be remembered. You are not being redefined, you are being restored. To awaken now is not to change but to return to the identity that was sealed in eternity. This realization is the first step of empowerment, though it arrives with quiet force. The sensitivity they mocked is now revealed as discernment. The restlessness they called weakness is revealed as calling. The hunger you felt for meaning, the constant sense that something was missing, was not a curse but a compass. You were never meant to live small, to bow to the roles that left you empty. Embracing this truth is like stepping onto holy ground, trembling but steady, knowing that heaven has been waiting for you to say yes. The voice that once whispered is now becoming a steady stream. And as you listen, your life begins to shift in ways they cannot control. Chosen one, your presence here proves that this unveiling was not coincidence. The path that felt fragmented now reveals itself as a line of hidden design, stretching from your earliest memories to this very moment. You have walked through fire, carried burdens, and endured silence not to be destroyed but to be refined. What was spoken over you by others was never the final word. Heaven's word is rising now, clearer, stronger, undeniable. Comment, I carry the silence's crown. If you feel this confirmation stirring in your chest, as a sign that you receive what was always yours. And know this, what you are remembering now is only the beginning, for the next unveiling will not whisper but thunder through your destiny. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2, the whisper of the true name. There have been moments when you felt it, chosen one. In dreams where a strange word echoed, in visions where an unfamiliar name stirred, in conversations where someone slipped and called you something that felt like destiny instead of chance. That was not imagination. That was heaven reminding you of what they never wanted you to remember. Divine memory always resurfaces, even when buried under years of lies. Isaiah 43 verse 1 declares, I have called you by name, you are mine. Those restless nights, those waves of inner unease, they were not weakness. They were reminders. They were signs that your spirit has been carrying a code the world could not erase. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you have ever felt that holy stirring inside, the quiet whisper of an identity you cannot yet put into words, because what begins as a whisper soon becomes revelation. And when it does, it changes everything. There are moments when the air around you feels thick, almost unnatural, as if something unseen is pressing in on your chest. You may not have named it then, but you knew something was working quietly against you, long before you understood who you really were. It showed up in subtle ways. The opportunity that slipped at the last moment, the friend who shifted without warning, the strange silence that followed your boldest steps. Each time you felt close to clarity, some kind of fog descended, making you doubt your own eyes. It was not loud, not obvious, but it was consistent, a shadow just beyond the edge of sight. That shadow carried the weight of resistance, marking you before you even carried the awareness of being marked. The whisper of your true name did not rise in a vacuum. It was born into an atmosphere already heavy with opposition. The emotional toll of this was profound, leaving you feeling like a stranger in your own story. You may have asked yourself why rejection seemed to follow you more closely than belonging. Why your laughter sometimes echoed back to you as if the world refused to receive it in fullness. The sting of being misunderstood cut deeper because it was not just about what you did, but who you were. Shame crept in through these moments, whispering that you were too much, too strange, too misaligned to ever be embraced. Cycles of self-doubt began to form, where each step forward was met with a voice telling you to sit down and remain silent. This was no accident. It was emotional sabotage woven into your journey to fracture the foundation of your identity. Yet even in those tears, something deeper held you, a sense that your pain was carrying a message. When you look closer, the pattern reveals itself with unnerving clarity. This was not random cruelty or scattered misfortune. It was resistance provoked by your potential. Like Israel in the wilderness, you were tested by a landscape that seemed barren. Yet every trial was shaping your ability to endure. Systems, people, and energies aligned, not because you were weak, but because your presence carried weight they feared. You were not lost. You were exiled, driven into hidden places so that your voice would never reach its full strength. The wilderness was never about punishment. It was a refining ground where the unworthy could not follow. Those who laughed at your struggle failed to see that exile was the stage where prophets are born. And just as Joseph was thrown into a pit before stepping into his purpose, your suppression was always the prelude to ascension. Think back and the threads become clearer than they once were. The betrayal that came not once but in cycles, each time from someone you trusted. The doors that closed without explanation, as if the timing was deliberately misaligned to break your will. The jobs, the relationships, the places where you poured your energy, only to feel drained as if something was feeding on your light. These were not accidents but recurring signs of interference, patterns meant to keep you from seeing yourself clearly. Like turning on a lamp in a dark room, the moment you name these patterns is the moment you rob them of power. For they thrived only in your unawareness, only when you believed the fault was yours. Now, the recognition is rising, and with it, the chains begin to crack. Resistance was not just external. It carried a spiritual texture that you could feel even when you could not explain it. The heavy air that lingered in rooms where your joy dimmed. The fog that wrapped around you when you stood close to your calling. The silent watchers who seemed unsettled when your confidence showed. The sudden confusion that fell over your mind like a veil each time you stepped closer to truth. None of this was coincidence. It was interference, drawn to your light like moths to flame. You were targeted because you glowed, because your spirit refused to bow to ordinary. They could not extinguish your fire, so they tried to surround it with smoke. Your response to all this was complex, layered, deeply human. At times, you shrank to make others comfortable, dimming your brilliance so you wouldn't provoke their envy. At other moments, you wore a mask of politeness, people-pleasing to avoid their criticism. Sometimes you rebelled quietly, withdrawing into silence rather than speaking the truth that burned inside you. There were nights when you asked yourself if it would be easier to surrender, to stop reaching, to stop fighting what seemed inevitable. Fear whispered that standing out meant standing alone, and the cost felt unbearable. Yet deep down, you never fully gave up, because surrender never tasted right on your tongue. You survived not because it was easy, but because something inside refused to die. Now, the perspective begins to shift, and what once felt like sabotage starts to look like confirmation. They would not have resisted you if you carried nothing worth resisting. The opposition itself became the evidence that your presence carried weight. Every attempt to silence you only sharpened your voice. Every act of suppression forged resilience in your bones. What they called weakness was training. What they called failure was foundation. And the whispers of your true name grew louder each time they tried to erase it. You are not the sum of their resistance. You are the proof that their efforts were never enough. Chosen one, the truth is this: you were opposed because you are powerful. The greater the resistance, the clearer the prophecy over your life. Every wall they built has become a signpost pointing toward your destiny. Every betrayal has turned into a testimony of survival. You were not meant to collapse under the weight of suppression. You were meant to rise from it carrying a fire they cannot touch. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire. If you feel this revelation stirring in your spirit, as a seal of the truth you now carry. And remember, what you are uncovering is not the end of the journey, but the threshold of revelation. For the next unveiling will not just confirm your power, it will call you into it. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign, right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, the power of revelation. There comes a moment when the whisper becomes undeniable, when heaven calls you by the name it wrote before time itself. That moment alters your destiny. Think of Abram, who became Abraham, stepping into covenant. Think of Saul, who became Paul, stepping into apostleship. When God renames, he realigns. And when that name is spoken over you, everything that was delayed begins to accelerate. Revelation 2 verse 17 says, "To the one who is victorious, I will give a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it." They cannot take what heaven has inscribed. They cannot steal the identity that was sealed before your birth. Comment, I rise marked by the divine. If you've ever felt that holy shift in your spirit, and share a dream, memory, or challenge where you sensed your identity breaking free from what they tried to impose. Because when the revelation comes, it is not just about you. It begins to shake everything around you. And what follows is not silence, but generational awakening. It often begins with a moment that seems ordinary, yet carries weight you cannot dismiss. Like remembering a sentence someone once spoke that suddenly holds new meaning. A coincidence that felt like nothing years ago now returns to you as a sign pointing toward the path you were always meant to walk. That sudden alignment between your inner knowing and the outer world creates a shift so sharp it feels as though your vision has been cleansed. What was once confusing now threads together into patterns, and the chaos that haunted your story begins to make sense. A forgotten dream, a name overheard, or a repeated number suddenly burns with clarity. It is as if heaven itself tilted the veil just enough for you to see that nothing was wasted. Revelation has a way of reordering your past into prophecy. Every detail around you begins to speak in a language you are only now beginning to understand. Numbers repeat like sacred drums. Words leap from pages with uncanny relevance, and silences fill with messages you had been deaf to before. The universe feels less like a backdrop and more like a manuscript etched with symbols, geometry, and codes waiting for you to notice. You are no longer reading books or watching hours. You are reading reality itself. The fabric of life becomes a scroll that reveals sentences written in the margins, ones you were blind to when you believed only in randomness. Ancient patterns whisper from the ordinary, teaching you that nothing placed before your eyes was accidental. This shift is not madness but mastery, the divine math unfolding in your sight. The signs do not remain external. They begin to awaken inside you with a force that cannot be ignored. Your intuition sharpens to the point where you know the truth of a room before a word is spoken. Your body reacts with undeniable precision. Chills when deception is near, calm when alignment is present, fire in your bones when your spirit is stirred. The boundaries you once lacked suddenly rise like walls of flame, no longer allowing old patterns to consume you. What once drained you now fails to penetrate because your energy has begun to filter what belongs and what does not. Even your silence carries weight, for it becomes a shield rather than a prison. The power of revelation is that it changes not just what you see but what you are willing to allow. As the internal transformation deepens, the outer world begins to rearrange itself around you. People who once mocked you now fall silent, sensing a shift they cannot explain. Doors that were shut begin to open with almost unnatural timing, Yet along with opportunity comes resistance that proves you are walking the right path. Environments you once tolerated start to expel you, not because you failed, but because your spirit no longer fits there. Unexpected alignments appear, like chance meetings that feel scripted, like words spoken by strangers that answer the questions you held in secret. The architecture of your destiny becomes visible in how events unfold, as if the unseen is finally stepping into form. What was once a theory becomes lived reality, and the alignment is undeniable. With each revelation, memory itself begins to take on a sacred glow. Dreams you dismissed as meaningless rise again, now carrying the clarity of prophecy. You recall childhood moments when you sensed something greater but lacked the words to describe it, only now realizing they were glimpses of your calling. The ache that haunted you for years becomes recognizable as the pull of remembrance. You are not learning something new. You are recovering what was buried beneath layers of survival. The voice within you has been whispering this truth all along, but only now do you have the ears to hear it. The ancient name written on your soul is awakening, and it feels less like discovery and more like returning home. As truth unfolds, destiny ceases to be a question and becomes a vision standing before you. You realize that the future is not a blank page but a restoration of what was always written. Permission slips fall away because revelation is not granted by them, it is granted by God. The timid doubts that once caged you collapse under the weight of prophecy that insists you are already chosen. You feel the pulse of your timeline in ways you cannot describe, like an inner drumbeat guiding you forward. What once felt far away now burns in your chest as a present reality, undeniable and urgent. The call no longer whispers, it demands to be answered. The moment of reclamation is fierce, for you begin to gather what was stolen, silenced, or forgotten. Every act of resistance they threw at you becomes proof of what they feared you would remember. Revelation hands back the power they tried to strip away, returning the voice they muted, the authority they mocked, the light they tried to bury. You realize that the fire in your spirit was never extinguished, only concealed beneath ashes. Now the wind of awakening fans those embers into flame, and your eyes burn with clarity. The prophecy of your name becomes a crown they cannot remove. The same revelation that heals you also equips you to walk with the authority they always dreaded. Revelation, chosen one, is not an ending but an invitation into the fullness of who you are. The truth has waited for this exact moment, and now it will not return void. You see with eyes that cannot be closed, and you walk with steps that cannot be denied. Every thread of your story, every scar, every silence, is gathered into a pattern too perfect to be coincidence. You stand at the threshold of destiny with a name written in light and a purpose carved in eternity. Comment, "I walk hidden yet never lost," if you feel this unveiling pressing against your spirit, and share a dream, memory, or challenge where revelation has already touched you. For the journey does not end with seeing. It begins with carrying what has been revealed, and the next awakening will demand even more of your spirit. Number 4, the generational unveiling. When a chosen one receives their true name, it does not stop with them. It breaks through the layers of silence, deception, and misplaced labels that have bound entire families. What was hidden in the bloodline comes to the surface, not to shame, but to heal. In Genesis 32 verse 28, Jacob wrestled until dawn, and his name was changed to Israel, marking the birth of a nation. In the same way, your awakening is not just for you, it is for those who came before and those who will come after. They tried to bury the truth so your children, your siblings, your descendants would walk in confusion. But the unveiling of your true name is the beginning of generational clarity. Comment, "I anchor this truth in my soul," if you feel this moment stirring in you, and share how your awakening has already begun to ripple into your family or your bloodline. For once the name is unveiled, heaven does not stop with you. It moves through everything connected to you. And when that happens, the story they thought they wrote is erased by the story God always intended. A sound older than memory begins to stir, not with noise but with resonance, like a buried hymn rising from beneath centuries of silence. It does not shout but hums through your bones, reminding you of something you never truly forgot. It is the ancient whisper that has followed you since childhood, surfacing in dreams, in sudden chills, in words that seem too precise to be chance. It is the sound of scrolls being unsealed, of seals breaking not with violence but with inevitability. You recognize it not with your ears but with your soul, as if heaven is reading back to you the lines it wrote into your being before the foundations of the world. This whisper is not new information. It is remembrance unfolding like dawn after a long night. You feel it now as the first note of your true story returning to you. There has always been a name buried within you, one not spoken by family, teachers, or crowds, but carved into eternity itself. This name is not the syllables the world used to call you, but the sound heaven used when it breathed you into existence. You never fit the labels they gave because those labels were not meant to contain what was eternal. You felt out of place not because you were flawed, but because you were carrying something the world did not have language for. Like the sealed scroll in Revelation, your true identity was wrapped and hidden until the right time, guarded even from your own eyes. You were the lost son in plain sight, the hidden remnant walking unnoticed in a world too distracted to perceive. Yet the silence around your true name has now broken, and it begins to echo in your spirit like thunder disguised as a whisper. All along, you have been cloaked in symbols unseen, carrying a mark that only the awakened could sense. Some people were drawn to you without explanation, sensing the glow of something they could not name. Others recoiled, unsettled not by your actions but by the resonance of what you carried. Your cloak was not woven of fabric but of light and shadow, a mantle passed through generations of those who bore the same mark. Like Elijah's cloak that carried the spirit of prophecy, you have worn something invisible yet undeniable. Even when you tried to hide, the mark remained, written not on your skin but within your essence. And those who were awake enough always recognized you without needing proof. Now the memory of sacred contracts begins to return, and with it the realization that your journey was never accidental. There were vows made long before you were born, signed scrolls sealed with fire, and assignments written in the stars that never forgot their orbit. Every struggle was not punishment but preparation. Every delay a timing device protecting you from doors not yet ready. The moments you thought were failures were in truth calibrations, guiding you back to the covenant you agreed to in a place beyond time. You did not stumble into destiny. You were held in orbit until the hour came. And now, that hour unfolds, bringing clarity to what felt like years of chaos. Your awakening is the unsealing of a mission older than your breath. Others have always seen something in you, though they rarely named it clearly. Their admiration, their jealousy, their suspicion, and their sudden rejection were not reactions to your behavior but to your presence. You carried a mirror, and without trying, you revealed the shadows or lights within them. Some loved you fiercely because you reflected the best they had forgotten, while others resisted you violently because you unveiled truths they were not ready to face. You triggered awakenings simply by existing, and though it confused you, it was never about you alone. Chosen ones reflect without effort, becoming living revelations to those around them. That is why their path is both blessed and burdened, for their very presence carries a sword of truth. This remembrance places you within a story far larger than yourself, a story of archetypes that cycle through history. The seer who speaks what others fear, the guardian who shields bloodlines, the rebel who breaks chains, the light-bearer who carries dawn into darkened lands. These are not myths of the past but living patterns, and you now find yourself aligning with one. The role you play is not an invention but an inheritance, one that many carried before you and many will carry after. Your name, your cloak, your covenant are pieces of this prophetic cycle. Chosen one, the veil between your names has been lifted. You are no longer defined by what they said, but by what heaven always declared. Walk now with the certainty that your identity is not borrowed, it is eternal. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment "I am chosen" to let this message anchor in your soul. Please, share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every super thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. You are not who they said you were. You are who God named you to be. And now your unveiling has begun.